Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. This video today is going to be a total recall back to 2020, just because it was an interesting year. And it's now 2026, which means we're also officially over halfway through this new decade of the 20s. I wouldn't really call this any sort of roaring 20s like how it was a whole century ago, but it's the modern day 20s nonetheless in the 21st century. But when it comes to 2020, though, for me personally, my experience with it, it was spring semester of high school for my senior year. And the thing was, my classes weren't as ideal compared to what they were last semester. I had pre-calculus as a first class, and with that, makes it really hard for your brain to wake up in the morning to be able to do crazy stuff like pre-calculus of all things. First thing in the morning at 8 a.m., barely being 8 a.m. And my last class was an art class, uh, which that was another thing that sucked because my weight training was my second to last class. It was the first time in 4 years in high school where I had weight training as a class that wasn't my last, which sucked because I'd like to be able to just do a workout and go home, sleep or shower afterwards after a nice productive day of school. And it was just always a nice way to end off on a good note with, regardless of what day of the week it might have been. But that spring semester, it was an interesting one. It wasn't as ideal, but they were able to manage it. And the thing was back during late February, if not early March, they made their first announcement about us having a week or two off. I forget how long it was exactly, but we were off for about a week or two because the pandemic was getting concerning and it was starting to, have an effect on the school life, to say the least. Now, that sort of thing made sense, so let it be. I don't know, I was glad that that was the case because that meant I didn't have to wake up real early in the morning and go to school and just be doing that for 5 days a week. The thing was, that was fine. Then it happened a second time. We were back in school for barely even a whole weekday, I believe, before that second announcement was made. So let it be. Whatever. Not a big deal. But everything changed during that third account. That third account was the rest of the year. But the rest of the year wasn't until May. That's usually your standard time frame for American graduates to be in the May area for people to graduate, whether it's high school or college. This was until July 31st. I didn't graduate high school until July 31st. And I remember I believed that I wouldn't even be able to graduate at all just because of this whole disaster of the pandemic. And it's crazy. One of the biggest things I actually learned from it with this very belated graduation was that none of the stuff from high school really mattered that much at all. It didn't matter if you were on good standing with your academics or bad standing with your academics. It didn't matter if you didn't have the needed expectations for your attendance or GPA or anything like that, because I learned that regardless, everybody got to graduate anyways, which I understand from a pandemic perspective and all the stuff that happened in 2020 in that regard. But at the same time, I learned the hard way that even if you do bother putting in some effort for high school, it doesn't take much effort for high school, let's be honest here. But nonetheless, all the effort that you would have put into it, whether you did or didn't put any into it, it didn't matter. They still would have passed you anyways and greenlit you for graduation. You didn't even have to go to school. You could have just avoided doing anything and everything, and you still probably would have been able to graduate because I've known people that I graduated with that had that exact same case happen with them, which was pretty crazy just because, you know, it's just a very enlightening experience, if I'm being honest. You just kind of learn through that exposure and just seeing it for yourself to where it finally understands why you hear people say, oh, yeah, that stuff doesn't matter. It's not really important. And it never was really that important to begin with. But, anyways, that was that for this high school era. In the spring semester, we had online classes, of course, during this time period, but like I said, it didn't really matter much. it was just a means of, I guess, them wanting to feel in control still. If I were to make any sort of guesstimate about it, it was just for the idea of feeling in control. But this is going to lead up to the next era of this whole 2020 experience with mine. Start off with the spring semester, and we're going to be going into the summer semester, the lockdown era. Basically, this would have technically happened in March, but it's just easier to, classify it as the summer era. So it's the summer era for this video sake. Now, the summer era was interesting because you were done with school, like officially done with school, but you were already not really doing much as it was, at least in my regard. Didn't really have to do too much. Yes, there was online work that was tedious, especially when it came to the pre-calculus stuff. Even though we weren't doing pre-calculus stuff, but the lockdown era was interesting. Not only did it happen during a time where I technically had classes, but there's just a bunch of free time that you wouldn't really have again. And it was just like that rare opportunity to where you would have all this time available that you won't be able to get back. And it was never going to be a thing to ever happen again. So that was something that I kept in mind during that whole thing, was that being the case. And, other than online work, that barely been anything. Usually what I was doing was art. I was playing a little bit of video games, of course, just because I like video games, but it felt kind of senseless, and also just because it was also during a time where I was taking a break from online games. I really didn't like them anymore. I was just getting tired of them. I didn't have any new games that I could really play until I ended up getting Dark Souls 1 and Yakuza 0. Uh, which, I've played Souls games before, way back when in the day, even prior to that. But it's just the fact that I actually had it for myself and was able to play it was very nice, and it gave me some new stuff to play. And I had a blast playing through Yakuza 0 and Dark Souls 1. And, I still replay Dark Souls 1. Usually the photos you might be seeing is going to be from Dark Souls 1. Uh, but that's regardless. Uh, it was just nostalgic, to be honest, being able to go back and play some games like that. I remember like that same year, I got uh I got my sketchbook done. I bought a sketchbook the year prior in like 2019 of that summer, and I actually got a whole sketchbook completely done during that time. But like I said, the lockdown didn't have too much going on. But even after the lockdown, there was just so many limitations on what you can and can't do, and just a completely day and night difference between what you used to be able to do versus what you could do now. Everything closed at an earlier time. You had to wear a mask. You couldn't sit down in public places. You had this whole 6 feet parameter shit that was going alongside with it. There was a lot of things that had to be allocated for, which I get it. Uh, you know, but it's just like, if we're so heavy about doing all this stuff, why are you even making it be the case to where you're having all these restrictions and still letting people go out? Just fucking stay inside. But knowing America, that's not really going to be the case. It's hard for them to listen. I think I remember hearing at one point during the summer that some places in Europe, I remember Australia at one point also, got done with their quarantine and they were able to go out and about like it was normal again, which I thought was crazy because you're telling me these other countries and places out in continents, all these other places out here, except the US, are managing to be done with all their crap with quarantine. And then I realized this is America. They don't like being told what to do. They don't like feeling that way. It's ironic with how it works, but I was just baffled. I think I even remember Canada being done at a pretty reasonable time because they followed their protocols. Um, but that's really all I have for that part when it comes to this whole lockdown era. I mean, other than all that, it was maybe like July, late July, where I went on a vacation with some old buddies of mine as a quote unquote senior trip because we didn't really have a senior trip that we were able to do. This was also when we were still technically high schoolers because we didn't graduate until July 31st, the very last day of July. But that's just going to lead up to this whole point now of the college era. So basically, after I graduated, last day of July, I had basically less than 2 weeks before I'd be going off to college. And let me tell you, day and night difference between high school and college. It's still school with education, but it's like a DLC that you paid for that you didn't have to pay for. But, people usually recommend you get the DLC for it. So college is the DLC expansion that you have after high school, and it's optional. So this college DLC is a DLC, of course. Now, in a nutshell, college is a fucking scam, but you can still enjoy it though. You can still enjoy it all. But in this day and age, it's completely different when it comes to college compared to how it used to be before. Because before, it used to be able to be worth going to college and actually, something worth to invest in when it came to college. But now, it's just a fucking scam. They'll do anything and everything out of their way to just try to screw you over one way or another. But that's the way it is. It ain't nothing new. But what I mentioned before earlier in this video, where all the stuff in high school really don't matter that all that much, you can apply that same stuff to college. And the thing is with college though is that you have some time that you can buy. You have some free time that you can just kind of buy and think about what it is that you might want to be doing with it. Just be sure you invest in it wisely because you're gonna be paying a lot of money back, and anything that you want to do at college, anything at all, it doesn't matter if it even is college related, it's going to cost money. And as a college student, you need some money because you're going to be struggling being broke about everything because the school itself is going to take any sort of money you have and leech it out of your wallet one way or another, however they can. It doesn't matter for what. Now, college is still, for me, it was a good experience. I enjoyed it. I ended up getting into an organization that's something important because if you're not involved in any sort of club, organization, or sports, and you're only there for just the academics, you're fucking yourself, to be honest. Because if you're gonna be doing all that, especially if you're gonna be doing all that whenever you aren't even living in your home area, you're kind of just wasting money that could be going into something else, to be honest. But you want to be able to have some sort of thing you're involved in that isn't just academics, because that's going to have a big cost on your mental toll. I learned that the hard way at one point, and that was basically late into my 2020 freshman year. I thankfully got to be involved in an organization that helped me balance and know how to adapt well when it came to having a lot on your plate. So I was able to adjust with having a lot of shit on my plate while I was getting constantly shat on by the school because they wanted to do this experimental thing with the major that I was in at the time before I changed it, of having 6 classes in one semester, and instead of doing it in your standard school, school period, you get to do it in half, so you get to speed run it. And the thing is that it fucked my GPA over very bad. Um, for that first semester, and it also made me lose a scholarship that was a very important scholarship, to say the least. Now, obviously, part of that falls under my account, but at the same time, it also was just ridiculous for the simple fact, keep in mind, this was ridiculous for the simple fact that they got rid of it that next year because they knew it wasn't working. And they knew from the beginning that it wasn't going to work, and they still went with it anyways. I don't understand how that even made sense because it fucked a lot of people over outside of just me and other. It fucked over a lot of other people I knew who even told me similar stories about like, yeah, they really made it bad for them, and no sort of reimbursement for it either. It was just crazy because like I said before, college is a scam. They'll do this type of crap to you just because they can, just because they want to try something new, thinking that it's going to be helpful, but when in reality it's not. But the best thing I can describe with college, and this is also part of my experience with college, and especially in this 2020 half in the beginning, is you have this new freedom, you have this new foundation to work with, you have this new independence, you have new opportunities to be able to have open for you at your own disposal through your own means, and you can do whatever you want with it. You have this idea and aspect of control, not necessarily no full control, because the school is just going to be, doing anything they can to, screw you over one way or another, usually. Um, but it's a nice, refreshing feeling that you can have a fresh restart. It's a breath of fresh air. But that's going to be wrapping up this video. Uh, College, I really don't have much for it when it comes to this first semester of it, just because it's the last part of 2020, and obviously it still has connections to the pandemic. I kind of already told about the organization stuff where I was involved in it, and I kind of just got to the point of with college in general too, and how it operates generally, because it's very predatory in the fact that they, the things that they do. But this is going to be wrapping up this video, though. Y'all take care, and thank you for your time for watching this. I'll probably be making a video about college more specifically in the future, so look forward to that.